Hey, welcome to 49cc Scoot. My name's Brent. Like many motorcycles and scooters, my TMAX has a large rear fender that's not very attractive. Fender Eliminator, also called tail tidy kits, are the popular way to get rid of the mudguard, but those currently cost around $200, and I wasn't willing to spend that much for a plastic inner fender cover and a metal license plate bracket with a tag light. I've seen a few DIY solutions posted online, but they were basically just chopping off the fender below the tag and weren't quite what I wanted to do. So I came up with an inexpensive way to get a clean look, and I'll show you how I did it. I'll get started in just a minute, but before we go any further, I need you to be aware that there may be consequences for removing or modifying the mudguard. First, it may not be legal or pass an inspection. Second, the rear tire will no longer be blocked from tossing whatever is on the road into the air at you or potentially anything around the bike. One of the most common complaints is that moisture from the road ends up on the rider, usually in the form of a streak down their back. In addition, you will need to switch up how the license plate is mounted and illuminated, as well as the reflectors. It's up to you to make sure everything is secure and meets safety standards. I'm just showing you what I did and not claiming that it meets all requirements. I needed to remove the mudguard in order to modify it, so first I took off this small rear panel. Two plastic rivets secure it, and they can be removed by pushing the center pin in and then pulling them out. Then the small panel was gently pried off. Once that's out of the way, you can see the two tag light connections, and you can remove those now if you'd prefer, but I did it later once they were even easier to access. Then I could start removing the rear fender assembly, beginning with 3 plastic rivets per side that are all in the area just above the rear tire. 4 nuts behind the underseat storage area were removed so the fender could come out. There are metal bushings sitting below each nut, so be careful not to misplace those. The fender could then be pulled down, and I disconnected those tag light wires that I mentioned before removing the assembly from the bike. Next, I removed all of the accessories from the rear fender, beginning with the tag bracket that's held on with 2 nuts. I removed 4 bolts that secure the tag light and the fender bracket to the rear of the mudguard before taking the bracket off. Then the wires were pulled through and the tag light was removed. I wanted to cut off all of the mudguard that comes down from the tail to create as flat and smooth of an appearance as I could, but when I looked at how the small rear panel fit against the fender, I realized that I needed to leave a little bit of material beyond what I would have thought would have been the features to follow for cutting. I marked just a little more than I expected to need for a good match. I put a small cutoff wheel in my rotary tool and planned my cuts before starting. I find it helpful to figure out the most comfortable or easiest way to position myself and the tool before doing any sort of critical cutting or grinding. You need to be careful with speed settings as well when working with plastic because some will melt back together at high tool speeds. I ended up with a little melting even with my relatively low RPM tool, but nothing that caused any major problems separating the pieces. I grabbed the bracket and put the remaining fender on with a couple of nuts tightened just enough to hold it in place for some checks. Then I popped the small panel in place behind it and checked how the fender matched up with it. It was closer than I intended. I was actually trying to play it safe and leave plenty of material to be sure that I could get a good match, but most areas were pretty well matched on the first cut. You may want to keep that in mind if you try this and leave a bit more on the first cut than I did. I marked the high spots where the most material needed to be removed, as well as a few features that I also wanted to get rid of to smooth out the panel even more. Then I removed the fender and took it back to the bench for a little more work. I switched over to a single cut carbide burr to grind away some features and to shape the edges. After a little fine tuning, it matched up about as well as I think it was able to. I sanded a few areas to smooth them out a bit more, and then used a flame to restore some of the gloss to the edges. I had a MAP gas torch handy, but that takes very light use or the plastic will quickly melt. A standard lighter would probably be much less risky. At this point I had the tail section smoothed out pretty well, aside from the bracket sticking way out. And since the TMAX has its tail and turn signals all in the body, I only needed to find a way to mount a license plate and a light for it, and some sort of rear reflectors. I wanted to modify the existing bracket to act as my license plate mount, so I started by bending its arms up to fit closer to what's left of the fender. Then I held my tag up to try and figure out where and at what angle I could mount it to give me plenty of clearance over the tire and so that the license plate could be read. I marked the bracket where I wanted to cut it and chopped it off with an angle grinder. Next I needed to find a way to mount the plate. I wanted the entire tag to be supported and able to use all 4 bolts, so I used the tag to mark a piece of 16 gauge steel to match its shape. Then I used the bracket to mark the inner shapes of it above the tag area so the addition would match up to the bracket. I also wanted to leave a little room above the tag in case I wanted to add a tag light or anything else there later. I cut most of the bracket with a bandsaw before finishing the shape with a grinder and smoothing out the edges. Then I drilled all of the license plate mount holes. Since I used some old rusty metal, I spent a little bit of time cleaning that up. I made sure everything matched up well, and then cleaned the bracket in the area where the 2 parts would fit together. I quickly tack welded it and then took it over to the scoot for a check. It looked good to me, so I went ahead and finished welding. I know that everyone can't weld, but that shouldn't stop you if you want to do something similar. It probably wouldn't be that hard to bend the existing bracket arms and flatten them in a vise or by hammering to give you a mounting surface. It probably won't match up to your tag mounts, but it wouldn't be difficult to make a simple bolt-on tag bracket from there. Once I was done, I cleaned up the welds and then ground and sanded the rusty original bracket as well. By that time, the license plate frame that I ordered came in. I plan to use this LED illuminated frame to make lighting the tag very clean and simple. By the way, check the description for a link if you're interested in getting your own. The wire location for this frame seems like it could have been better because I had to mark and notch my plate so it would fit. Then I marked the bracket and drilled a hole large enough to allow the wires to go through with a grommet. After I made sure that would work, I popped the grommet out and primed and painted the bracket. I gave the bracket a couple of days to dry before doing a quick mock-up to see how the tag light wires would need to be ran. Then I cut the wires to length and added heat shrink tubing for a little protection. I used the fasteners that came with a tag frame to secure the top of the tag, along with medium strength thread locker for extra insurance, even though it did come with nylock nuts. I wanted to keep some sort of reflector in the rear for safety, but I didn't want to use the big stock reflector, so I used tag bolts with reflectors for the lower tag mounts. The stock mudguard and bracket also had side reflectors, but I have reflective wheel stripes that are very visible, so I wasn't really worried about those too much. I routed the tag light wires around the bracket and secured them with cable ties, and then ran them through the passage in the mudguard. I bolted the bracket and the mudguard onto the bike once more, just tight enough to hold it up. Then I installed male bullet-style crimp-on connectors on each wire from the tag frame. I connected the white wire from the frame to the blue wire from the scooter, and then the black wire to the black wire, before securing the wires in the original covering. All 6 plastic rivets were installed in the mudguard, before torquing the bracket nuts to Yamaha's spec of 10 Newton meters or 7.2 foot-pounds. Then I reinstalled the small rear panel and its 2 plastic rivets. After a quick check to be sure the tag light worked, the job was done. I didn't do a perfect job with paint and finish work, but in my opinion, It looks as good as any of the other aftermarket Fender Eliminators that I've seen, and I only put about $35 into the license plate frame plus materials that I had around. This could be done even cheaper with a small LED tag light above the plate instead of the illuminated frame. If you found this video helpful or interesting, please hit the like button. Subscribe for more scooter how-tos and projects, and click the bell to receive notifications so you won't miss anything. Thank you for watching.